So visual processing. So how we process what we see. This can be something very important to note if you are working in a very cluttered workspace, if your classroom has a lot of decorations up on the wall. For some kids, that may be very hard for them to be in due to just the overwhelmingness of that. So sometimes a cleaner, less cluttered space might be ideal for kids who are struggling with visual processing. On the flip side of that, you may have kids who are sensory seeking for visual. They are looking for visual items, things that they can see, and things that they can get a good look at. And so we'll talk about what that looks like next. So if I'm thinking calming for visual processing, then I'm going to think things like low lights or no lights. I might allow a student to wear sunglasses. I might do things such as if I do have a very busy set area, a very busy work area, then maybe I'm going to cover some of the shelves. Maybe I offer a study carrel. I have easily, when I was in the classroom, made coverings for my bookshelves with shower curtains. Just, they make a nice, easy, super curtain. I can string them up and then everything behind them is gone suddenly. Use natural lighting when possible. Research tells us that most of the schools we know have a lot of fluorescent lighting, and for kids with autism and kids with sensory needs, we know that that type of lighting is sometimes very difficult to tolerate. If you have a large enough classroom, then maybe you have a distraction-free desk tucked in a corner somewhere where there is less visual stimuli. Calming colors is generally considered to be things like green and blue. Neutral colors are generally considered to be things like gray, brown, white, black. And then on the flip side, if we're looking for alerting, we need to wake people up, we need to up their energy level, then reds and yellow colors, oranges, are considered to be very alerting. Bright lights, if I'm needing to draw attention to a specific area in something that we're working on, I might zip a little highlighter across that. Brightly colored paper, and we've already talked about the paint on the walls, but just thinking through some of the good strategies for visual processing. We have talked about a lot of different sensory areas, and it can be confusing to figure out how to get started and to know what's the right thing to do for the right child. So my general advice is, when you don't know, go with heavy work. It is a great go-to tool, and we're going to talk specifically next about some heavy work strategies. So what are some actual heavy work activities? And these can look like a lot of different things. So moving chairs or furniture. If you're home, carrying groceries, pushing the cart, pushing the grocery cart, or it could be a cart in a school-based setting. Swimming, if you're at home and you have access to a pool or a lake, then swimming is a great heavy work activity. Ride a tricycle or a bike of some kind. It could even be an adapted bike for a person with disabilities would also work great for this. Climbing on playground equipment such as the monkey bars, or pushing someone else on the swing. Pounding on Play-Doh, if you're in a seated based position and you don't have a lot of good outdoor options, then Play-Doh can be your friend. Also, they make that heavier therapeutic kind of stuff. Some of that is great for heavy work activities. Blowing bubbles is another great way to get some heavy work activities into your mouth. Eating crunchy, chewy foods like apples or beef jerky would be a good heavy work activity for your mouth. Also, remembering earlier when we talked about eating pudding, applesauce, any kind of a thicker liquid, a milkshake, sucking that through a straw. It's going to give you heavy work activity into your mouth. And then lastly, but not least, is riding a scooter board on your stomach, probably hands down, using your hands and arms and legs to kind of push yourself along. But riding a scooter board can give great heavy work input. And heavy work is just a good all-around way to bring kids back to the level, like to the right level where we want them to be at. So heavy work activities is probably one of my most often go-to that I use for students and kids of all ages, even my own self. In the resource link on the KEDC module, if you're taking this session as a part of that, then there is a list of heavy work activities in there, a link provided to a list. So how do I use all of this information that we've talked about to support my students? So we are going to look next at a sensory diet. The first time I heard about a sensory diet, I thought, a diet plan? My kid is 5. He doesn't need a diet. And so I think that sometimes people confuse these. This is not necessarily food-based, though there can be planned food-based activities within the sensory diet. But what a sensory diet is meant to be is regularly planned sensory-based activities within the context of your day, with the goal being that it's going to help the child or student stay regulated and keep their sensory system organized throughout the day. So here's the way that I look at this is that if a student struggles all day with their sensory processing system, it's a big impact in their ability to get an education, then I'm going to plan a sensory diet for the entire day. I'm going to have activities at appropriate intervals. For some students I've worked with, that's every hour. For other students, it might be more frequent. It could be every half hour. It could be every 2 hours. It's really dependent upon what that student needs. Other students, maybe they only struggle with their sensory system. Maybe they have struggles more so in the afternoon, but they do okay in the morning. Or maybe they do really well during their activity-based classes. They get up, there's some more movement, but they really need some sensory-based supports during their core content classes like math or English. So it can look very different based upon the needs of the student. And I tend to tell people that there's not necessarily the only wrong way is this, it doesn't meet the needs of that student. So it could be planned activities across a whole day. It could be planned activities for just parts of the day. And both of those are right as long as it meets the need of that individual student. And we'll talk about what that will look like. This is a sensory diet example for a student who needed support to go out to the regular lunchroom. So before the student went to the regular lunchroom, they engaged in some heavy work activities in the special education setting. They had a lot of struggles with the noise. The lunchroom had 400 other kids and was very loud. And so it was very echoey, and there were so many different sensory things going on, the smells. But we really felt like it was important for the student to be around their peers at least some first portions of the day. So before they went to the lunchroom, we engaged in some heavy work activities. And then when they were in lunch, they had an iPod or a CD player, something that they could listen to some quiet music while they were there, or they were allowed to choose from some noise canceling headphones. And then after they left the lunchroom, we did some deep breathing activities with blowing bubbles and some good visual supports. Now this is just an example of one component, right? I just need to put some sensory activities into one small portion of the day. But you can branch this out over the course of a whole day if you have a student who needs that kind of support. So just thinking about what activities would be appropriate and would help that student keep their sensory system on the right level, on a nice even plane, so that they're not constantly seeking out things or they're not constantly trying to reject sensory input. So I have found sensory diets to be a really good support. It takes a little bit of time to get them right and to get them set up, but they are so worth the effort to do for those kids who really need that extra level of support. So something to consider. Other strategies to consider for students who have unmet sensory needs or students who struggle with sensory processing. Make sure you give a warning during transition. So fair warning that we're about to finish this activity or we're about to move on. So maybe that is a visual schedule or a visual timer. Maybe it's just a statement that says, hey guys, we're done in 2 minutes. If they're a student who can process auditorily, then maybe it's just a statement that says, hey, in 2 minutes we're cleaning up, guys. 2-minute warning. We're getting ready to clean up. Visual schedules are wonderful, and if you have a student who has a visual schedule, then it's very easy to incorporate a sensory diet into that schedule as just a part of their everyday routine, that is a part of their normal day. So I really like visual schedules. I also really like visual timers. You can see a couple of examples on your screen. The ones on the left side that the red disappear are called time timers. They also have an app. It's for students who do not know how to tell time, but they can tell when the red is gone, so they can see the red shrinking as their time for whatever the activity is goes away. So they are super nice. There's lots of options for visual timers. You could use just an egg timer or a stand timer, but something to consider. Just some other things to think about for students with unmet sensory needs. Other important things to think about. Avoid taking recess. If you have a student who struggles with sensory processing, then you need to avoid taking recess at all costs. They need that movement break. They need to get up, because running around on the playground or even walking the halls, if we're talking about an older student, is going to give them deep pressure into their hips and knees, and going to help reorganize their sensory system. So please, please avoid taking recess. Generally, it seems to be that the kids who need recess the most are the ones that we are most often taking it from. So come up with an alternative plan. I understand that sometimes schools need a punishment, but taking recess is like, it's shooting your own foot, right? You're shooting yourself in the foot, and setting kids up that they're still going to be engaging in whatever behavior. So also provide movement breaks throughout the day. All kids need movement breaks. We know that the attention span of a 5-year-old should be just about 5 minutes, right? So if we think about an average class for reading in kindergarten, we're asking them to sit for 30 minutes sometimes. Sit and pay attention, but we know that they should be able to pay attention developmentally about 5 or 6 minutes maybe. So knowing that sometimes we are asking kids to do things that are very developmentally not always appropriate. So we have to build in movement breaks. We need to think about that and provide all kids and even adults the chance to get up and move a little bit. Provide fidgets at their desk whenever possible. You can see on the screen, this is an example of a piece of a mop head that was clean and not used. They just cut off a strip of it and put it underneath of the table. It wasn't obvious that it was there. It was just at this child's assigned seat. So thinking kind of outside of the box, you don't have to give them a fidget spinner, but what are other options? What are some less intrusive options that we can use? Because kids should fidget, right? They are supposed to fidget. Sitting still for long periods of time is, it's not developmentally appropriate to ask them to do that. So provide them with ways to meet those needs, or they will seek out their own ways to meet those needs. And adults tend to like those results less. Let's take a look at our options for teaching kids self-regulation, because frequently kids with sensory processing issues also struggle with self-regulation. So let's take a look at that. So let's talk about first, what is self-regulation? So self-regulation is a person's ability to endure sensations and distress and then form a suitable response. So why is this important? It affects everyone's attention span, their ability to be ready to learn, your ability to apply the information that you have learned. All of this comes back to self-regulation. So we are going to look at some strategies to teach this to kids, because it has to be formally taught. Unfortunately, for many of our students, this is not something that they're going to pick up on by watching other kids, or they'll just learn automatically. So we're going to have to explicitly teach this. We are going to look at two different programs to teach self-regulation. The first one is the Zones of Regulation. The Zones of Regulation has been around for years. It is not a new program by any means, but what it does is it takes our feelings and makes them visual. We give them a color. So the blue zone means we are sad, sick, tired, or bored. The green zone is where we want to be. We're happy, calm, focused, and we're ready to learn. The yellow zone is frustrated, worried, maybe it's silly or excited, or we're starting to lose a bit of control. And the red zone is where we want to avoid if we can, or we at least want to deal with it appropriately if we are in the red zone: mad, angry, mean, terrified. Generally, if you're in the red zone, you are out of control. So the Zones of Regulation obviously has a book that you can buy, and they have a really nice website that you can go to, but there are thousands of free Zones of Regulations that are out there. So even if you don't own the book, you can still access and use this without it. So you're just teaching kids that I'm in the yellow zone. So if I'm in the yellow zone, here's how I feel. Well, here's some strategies to get back to the green zone. And I think the next picture that we'll look at shows us some strategy options. So this is just another example of what Zones of Regulation can look like. And you can adjust this. It could be in pictures, it could be in words, it can be in a combination of both, like on this particular slide. You can adjust this for your student. So on this one, what I like about it is at the bottom, it says use the tools that you can use to get back to the green zone. So for this particular kid, they can count to 10, take some deep breaths, use a fidget, do some wall push-ups, talk to an adult. It gives you options and ways, strategies to help get you back to green zone, which is where we need students at so that they are ready to learn. The other nice thing about Zones of Regulation is that they have provided some great video examples, and I provided the link for that in the KEDC module. There are some great video example that could be shared with parents on how to set this up in their house. So if you have students who are working on a remote learning basis right now, then we can still help teach them self-regulation strategies even at home. So that was some really awesome information on how to use things you have around your house to set this up. So parents don't always have access to a printer, they don't always have access to laminating paper, all those kinds of things, but how could you make a zone of regulation and check in with your kids at home? So I really appreciate that they put that out there. So I have provided the link back to their website, and if you kind of scroll down their website, it's their COVID-19 response. But it was very fabulous on how to set up a Zones of Regulation at home. And right now, everyone needs that kind of support. All kids probably could use some sort of check-in. Where am I at emotionally? How do I get myself back to a green zone so that I'm ready to learn today? So something to think about. So this is the Incredible 5-Point Scale. It's also my other go-to when I am trying to help kids with self-regulation. So what I like about the 5-point scale is that there are also thousands of examples out there online. So I could make my own, and I have provided the link back to the Incredible 5-point Scale website. They also have a book, but this is another one that you can use it without, although the books are helpful in both cases of the Zones of Regulation and the Incredible 5-point Scale. They both have additional activities, so if you can get your district to buy those, then it would be worth your while. The Incredible 5-point Scale, what it does is same as Zones of Regulation. It helps us break down the parts of our feelings. So on the Incredible 5-point Scale, a 1 is your happy place, whatever it is, it's not bothering this child. A 5 is where it makes me lose control, and you're going to obviously need some help. A 4 is I'm really upset. Safe people, what I like about it is that fourth column. Safe people will help me. I can leave the room for a walk with permission, squeeze my hands together. What the Incredible 5-point scale does is it breaks down the emotions of the child, and you can use this for all kinds of things, all kinds of different scales, and you would customize it probably for the student. And then that fourth column always tells kids what they can do, because I think what I find frequently is that we are constantly telling kids what not to do. Don't do that. Don't do that, but we rarely tell them what they should be doing. So the Incredible 5-point scale is so nice because it tells them what should they do if they're upset, because everybody gets upset. Everybody gets mad at some point in their life, but being mad or upset and being socially appropriate is a learned skill, right? It's something that takes years to practice. And if you think about it, think about the adults in your life who struggle to be mad or angry or upset and still be socially appropriate, right? I know in my life, I know a few folks who still struggle with that skill. So we have to look at this for kids as a teaching opportunity. I need to teach them how to be upset and be socially appropriate, because obviously they're not picking up on that just by watching other people, and maybe they don't have a good model. So this is a great way to make this visual. Make this as visual as possible, because feelings, angry, mad, sad, they're so vague, and what one person feels may look a little different to another. So the Incredible 5-point scale is definitely something that you should take a little more time and look up on your own. And there are thousands of examples out there. These are just some helpful websites that I have talked about at different points during this presentation. Understood.org has tons of great information on sensory processing. Sensoryprocessingdisorder.com is going to talk about what it is if you want more detailed information on what it could look like. Here are the zones of regulation and the Incredible 5-point scale websites that I have found to be so helpful. Also, here are sensory activities, just ideals to help you get started for some either sensory diet activities or just getting more sensory activities built into your day for students. And there are also, if you Google sensory activities, 1,000,001 will come up. So lots of good options out there. Here are some great books. These are some of my favorite picks. I have to, of course, put on Carol Karanowitz, The Out of Sync Child, and The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. The Out of Sync Child goes more into details on what is sensory processing disorder, or she calls it sensory integration dysfunction. The Out of Sync Child Has Fun is more, here are lots of different thoughts and ideals for activities that you can do. Picky Pete, Squirmy Wormy, and Sensitive Sam are all kids' books meant to be read to either the child with sensory issues or his or her classmates. So I really like the children's literature options here. Other good books worth reading are Brenda Smith Miles and Suzanne Culp, A Buffet of Sensory Interventions. And so that's geared more towards, the yellow book is geared more towards middle and high school students. And the blue book, Sensory Issues and High Functioning Autism Spectrum and Related Disorder, is more geared towards your younger students. But they both do a nice job of breaking down strategies and goals for sensory processing issues. Just something so you know that they're out there. Here are my references. I always want to provide those, and I have additional ones. If that's something that you're interested in, feel free reach out and contact me. I know this is a lot of different information, a lot to take in at one time. So if you are thinking about this, or you have a child-specific question, you are completely welcome to email me. I will respond. Might take a few days, but I will respond to you. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I hope you have a great day.